Hello everyone, welcome back to Karmic Mentality, and today we're going to dive into the all-new Sony ZVE10 camera. Now, whether you're a beginner content creator like myself or even a professional filmmaker just looking to add to your digital gear collection, this camera is perfect for the most of you watching. In this video, we're not going to dive too deep into the advanced functions and features. Instead, we're going to focus on the basics of the camera just to broaden your knowledge on how to get started on this little toy, so you can be confident playing around with it and not be completely lost when it's right outside of the box. Now, before you even turn this camera on, you're going to need an SD card. So you can flip this camera upside down, and where your battery sits, which is right over here, open up that hood and your SD card sits on the left side of your battery. I'm going to leave a link down in the description below to pick up this SD card, but the one I use, which is also very highly recommended because it is so reliable and so fast, it is the SanDisk Extreme Pro SD card. The way this goes back in is the pins make sure that they're facing downwards towards the right, just like that. And so that it goes in, make sure you hear the click. Once you hear the click, you can shut the door. Perfect. Now moving on to our left side of the camera is where we have our headphone input, our HDMI input, and our USB-C port input. The USB-C port is what's going to charge your battery inside your camera. Now, do not mistaken this headphone port for a microphone port. I did this for like half a day. I was wondering why my microphone wasn't working. I thought it was broken. And then eventually I realized because my straps were actually covering this section over here, which is where the microphone input is located, which is coded in red. Do not mistaken this microphone input for the headphone input. They're very different things, and I just want to save you guys time because I wasted literally half a day actually finding out why my microphone was broken. Now, next up is the top of the camera. We have our cold shoe mount, our internal microphone over here, which is decent, is better than the other Sonys, but it's still not as good as even the cheapest external microphone that you can get from Amazon. I highly recommend you get a external microphone if you're going to be shooting vlogs or videos or anything like that. Now moving on to your on and off button over here. This button over here allows you to switch from modes of camera to recording to S&Q. This is your recording button. This is the button that you use to shoot your pictures. And then this is your zoom in and out. Background defocus, you don't need to worry about that right now. This black wheel is for your aperture, which I'll explain to you in a bit. Now the screen, Sony did a really amazing job with the screen because what you can do is now flip it, and it's kind of like the older camcorder styles where you could see yourself and you can see your entire setup, and if there's anything that is outside of the frame, you could obviously, make the adjustments, make sure everything's in the frame, go back to recording. But the other cool thing is that you can now flip this screen and close it this way too. What this does is that it makes the screen hide behind the camera, and now the screen is not exposed out, so when in traveling, it's less prone to scratches and other damages. So a pretty thoughtful feature that Sony put in. Moving on to the buttons on the right side of the screen are our menu button, function button. You have your wheel over here. You can use the same wheel to scroll up and down, or you can use it to control the shutter speed. You don't need to worry about the display, the time, whatever, all of these things, but you do need to worry about the ISO, the playback button, and the trash can button. Now, once you turn on your camera, the first thing you're gonna do is change everything to manual mode, because chances are if you just bought your camera and you have just taken it out of the box, it's most likely on intelligent mode for the picture and the video. Now, in order to switch to manual mode, first you need to know which mode that you're on in terms of picture or video. So you're gonna have to press this button over here, which is going to, once you press it, now I know that I'm on video mode. If I press it again, I'm on S&Q. We don't need to worry about the S&Q. Press it one more time and you're on picture mode. So when you're on picture mode, for example, you go into the menu, press the menu button. These are the tabs up here. In order to scroll through the tabs, you got to press the function button. So if I press function, now I'm on tab 2, tab 3, and so on and so forth. So the photo tab is the first tab over here, and then the video tab is the next one, at least for the most part. So for the photo tab, once I scroll down over here, I'm on page 1 out of 11. You can go to page 3 and you can see over here shoot mode, which is set to manual exposure. When you click it, the middle button is the OK button. When you click it, yours is most likely going to be on intelligent mode. You want to scroll down into manual and click that to manual. Similarly, you want to do the same thing for video mode. So again, press your mode switching button over here. Press it one more time, and then now I'm on video mode. It's already set on manual, that's why it shows the M, but I'm going to show you guys how to set that on manual as well. You go back into your function, and now, as I mentioned, that the second tab is for the video mode. So you can press your function button. Now you're on your second tab. It's right on the first page. The very first thing over here says shoot mode, manual exposure. You can click OK, and yours is most likely on intelligent mode. I want you to go down and select it for manual mode. The reason why I told you to do this before anything else is because if you are on intelligent mode, it's not going to allow you to change your ISO according to what you want it to be. It's going to stay on auto, and the camera is going to do it for you. The camera is not going to allow you to do it unless if you change the entire system to manual. All right, so now that you have your camera set to manual mode, I will explain to you what these 4 things are. This is pretty much the basics of this video, except for this MM over here. We're not going to focus on that. So this over here is your shutter speed, this is your aperture, and this is your ISO. So your shutter speed is now controlled by this wheel. You can just shift it left or right and you can control it. I keep mine at 1/50 because a good rule of thumb to follow is that if your frame rate is whatever X amount of frame rate that you're using, your shutter speed should be double from that amount. So if my frame rate is 24, closest double number is 50. If my frame rate is 30, the shutter speed should be 1/60. And similarly, if my frame rate is 60, then my shutter speed should be 1/120. Of course, you can change the shutter speed. It's not always based on your frame rate. Sometimes you can change it around depending on which environment that you're shooting in, which I'll cover up in a bit and tell you guys what Google has to say about this. And the next thing is your aperture. Your aperture is mainly dependent on your lens. Now this lens particularly, the lowest number that it could go up to is 3.5 and the highest is 5.6. My Sigma can go all the way down to 1.4. What aperture does is that the more the aperture, the more light that it allows it to come in, which means the lesser the number. So the lesser the number, larger the aperture, which means it's allowing more light to enter the camera. And the smaller the aperture, the larger the number will be. But you want it to be a little bit close to 3.5 or even lower for cinematic views. For example, if I'm shooting with my Sigma 16mm and I put the aperture to 1.4 or even 1.8, you can tell that the camera is focusing on the subject and the background of the subject is all blurry, which means that it's giving it a very cinematic look. It's giving it a focused look on the subject and everything else is not really so important. That way, you have a better image quality, you have better video quality. It just sort of gives it that illusion. But if you don't want that background blurriness, then you can increase the number to, let's say, 3.5 or 4.5 or something of that sort, and the background will be more stable. So you can play around with it if you have a extra lens that could go down to like 1.4. Otherwise, if you're sticking with the 16 to 50mm lens kit that comes with this camera, I say stick by the 3.5 because it doesn't really make the background that blurry anyways. It's just good enough for focusing on the subject and that's it. Like my hand, for example, the background will be just a little bit blurry. You can see right over here. And the next thing is the ISO. So the ISO sensitivity is a standard set by international organization for, this is a Google definition by the way, for standardization, which is ISO, that represents sensitivity to light as a numerical value. Now, the higher the number indicates a higher sensitivity and a greater ability to capture light. The ISO sensitivity is set and changed in the shooting settings menu. What it means by that is when you go on the ISO and if you jack it up all the way to make light come in, because you're outdoors, it's nighttime, and you want light to come in. You're gonna see that the colors are getting distorted, the image quality, it's not that clear, and all that kind of stuff. So although you can get more light into the camera, it's just not going to be the greatest image quality. So the best thing to do, a good rule of thumb, is to make sure that the ISO is the lowest as it could be possibly. I mean, it's more like keep the ISO at a level that you could get away with. If it was dark night outside and I had no light, like an external light, then even like 10,000 wouldn't do. It would still make the image pretty poor. So what you'd need in that situation is an external light source to compensate for the light that is not being given to the subject. Have that external light source that is shining on the subject. That way you do not have to jack up the ISO, and you can keep the ISO low. That way your image is going to still be crisp and clear, and your colors are not going to be as distorted. Now, what Google has to say about the shutter speed, for example, what is a good shutter speed? It says 1/500. The shutter speed works best for wildlife. Remember when I said that it doesn't always have to be 1/50 or like double your frame rate. You could also mess around with it depending on the environment. This is what I'm talking about. So take some notes and try this out on your own when you're out there taking photos. 1/500, the shutter speed works best on wildlife, sports, action photography, etc. And then 1/250 is an excellent shutter speed for slower moving animals or walking people. 1/125, use this to take a photograph of a moving vehicle. And then 1/60 or 1/50 is your standard shutter speed on a camera. So that's a good tip that you could use out there today if you have your camera handy, and see if these works, right? And then the next thing is the ISO. Now, this is a good rule of thumb over here. 100 or 200 is the best ISO for outside pictures on a sunny and a bright day, because you don't want too much light coming in. You want the ISO as lowest as it could be, and try to put it on one of those sun shades on your lenses if possible, if you have one, because that's going to minimize all the glare. And then it says 400 ISO for cloudy days or indoors for window light portraits, and then 800 ISO for indoors without a flash, and then 1600 plus ISO for really low light situations. Now, this is not exact, like this is all subjective, because what Google might think is low light versus what I think versus what you think, it's going to be all different, because you might be in a different low light situation than what I'm in. So try them out. Let's say, for example, the 800 ISO for indoors without a flash. Now, if 800 isn't working for you, kind of jack it up a little bit or make it down a little bit, depending on what works for you. Try it out, kind of do your due diligence and do your own research. This is just an example that I'm giving you, kind of like a guideline, so that you can get started on it. You know, without actually having to worry about how to get started. Now you know where to get started, and then you can mess around with it, play around with it. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is if you press the function button, this is going to get your little shortcut buttons to come up. I have mapped them according to me, so try to find where, like if you press the function button, I'm sure your focus area is going to be somewhere over here. Go on your focus area, and then if you click this gives you 3 different focus areas. You got flexible, you got zone, and you got wide. Wide is typically like, you know, the whole frame. And then you got zone, you've got your flexible, which is you can literally move it around to where you want it to focus. All right, so the next thing I wanted to mention is when you go into the menu mode over here, on the second tab at the bottom on the first page, the file format, you can click that and you can change it from 4K to HD. Same thing if you go back on to the menu mode. And then underneath file format is recording setting. You can change that from 24 frames at 100 megabytes to 30 frames, either 60 or 100 megabytes. But I recommend choosing at 100 because it's just better quality that way. Now, if you do want to increase your frame rate to 120 or 60, you are going to have to compensate on the file format. So if I go back into the menu, file format, if I go into HD, now that will allow me to choose 60, 30, 24, 120, and it gives me a little bit of flexibility in terms of frame rate. And the last thing is when we go into your playback, so let's say you take a bunch of pictures, videos, you go into your playback. Now this took me a little time to realize, so I want to save you guys some time. When I'm scrolling like this through my pictures, in order to delete them, I have to press the delete button and then delete, right? And I had to do that for individual ones. I wasn't able to look at all the pictures all at once. There's a good trick around it, is that if you press the zoom out button, so this way, if I press that, I'm able to go all the way into the folder where I can see multiple pictures and different dates of where I clicked those pictures. And then if I zoom out again one more time, I can go all the way into the calendar, and you can change from August to September, July, whatever. But in order to delete multiple pictures, I'm going to go back in, okay, this way. I'm going to go back in. And now, in order to delete multiple pictures, we're going to need to click on menu. And when you click menu, it's going to automatically go to playback and delete. Click that, and then multiple images, click that. And then you can literally select, like, let's say this individual, this individual, this individual. You can select all of that, or you can just select the entire date, and it'll just select all of the pictures in that date, and then it'll allow you to delete all of them. But when you do select a bunch of these pictures, you can't just click the delete icon. It's not going to work. Instead, you have to click the menu icon again, and then it'll say delete images. Click OK, which I'm not going to do right now. And then there you have it. You can delete multiple images that way. I'm going to go back because I don't need to delete them. And that was the end of my video, guys. I hope this explained or gave you a little bit of confidence on how to get started, at least, so that you can now play around with it. I know this wasn't so in-depth, but I also didn't want to lose your attention span, because we can't really stay too attentive. How do you say that word? Attentive? Anyways, for like an hour for just like learning something like this camera that we've never picked up before. I know, especially for beginners, even for myself, like I'm still learning this. And I was looking at other videos that people were making, and they were like hour-long videos, 45-minute-long videos, 30-minute-long videos that were like the shortest ones, which gave a lot of information, but it was a lot of information to retain in general. So I didn't want to kind of fry your brain all at once. So that's why I came out with a video where I could compile all the important things that you need to know first, so that you could get confident with it in the beginning. Now you can play around, explore, see what works best for you with the ISO and all that kind of stuff, aperture and everything. And then once you have this cracked down, go out, look at more videos, and further enhance your knowledge on this camera. All right, that's it for me, guys, today. Thank you very much for listening if you came this far, because I know I try to make it short as I could. I know this is still a very long video. And until next time, guys, peace out. If you guys could, please give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next one.